Hello, good evening and welcome. You've just entered the arena. I'm Michael Coren, whether you like it or not, and thank you for joining me. I hope you had a wonderful weekend, and we've got a great week lined up. And tonight's show, wow. Now, our schools are being drowned in gratuitous and agenda-driven social programs. I say this 2 days after the National Post withdrew an ad that highlighted some of the details of a horribly intrusive and tendentious sex education curriculum proposed by Ontario's Liberals. The curriculum is redundant in that children know plenty about sex, too much really, at an increasingly early age. And it's obvious that this is all part of a greater campaign to force acceptance of certain lifestyles on our kids, as has been attempted and to an extent achieved on pretty much everybody else. The ads were strong, but fair, and far less harsh than so much of the propaganda we see from the alternative point of view. But intimidation and pressure can be difficult to resist. I always remember a woman called Michelle, then a member of the Toronto District School Board's Equity Advisory Committee. She had contacted me to complain about how she'd been treated after making some comments about the committee's draft policy on, quote, anti-homophobia. She said that when she raised even minor objections to this document at a committee meeting, she was shouted at and labelled a homophobe. I was supposed to interview her on my last show, but then she suddenly cancelled. I've thought about it over the weekend, and people have spoken to me. She said, I don't think it would be in my best interest to appear at this time, and I'm worried that my husband might be at risk. When I contacted the Equity Advisory Committee, we were told, Michelle is only a parent, she doesn't represent anyone, and she is singularly destructive. The Equity Advisory Committee had around 30 members, consisting not of a cross-section of society, but of invited representatives of specific equity-seeking groups. Now, 6 of the people were gay, all of them teachers, none parents. They and their allies were particularly anxious for this policy document to be pushed through, even though reports on race, faith and disability had been waiting for consideration for an extremely long time. So eager were some members of the committee for the anti-homophobia paper to be approved that they suggested that community consultation, listen to this, would not be necessary. Now, a glance at the paper explained the rush. Quote, identifying and eliminating homophobic and heterosexist bias in board policies, guidelines and day-to-day operations, protocols and practices, deep breath, ensuring that educational practices in all grades are inclusive and reflect the contributions of the diverse lesbian and gay communities and other communities of people who identify themselves on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity, and that all forms of stereotyping, prejudice and discrimination against these communities are challenged and removed. Sorry, I was getting carried away. Ensuring that principles of anti-homophobia and sexual orientation equity permeate the curriculum, I'm not making this up, in all subject areas and all grade levels. And the removal of all materials and perhaps people who exhibit traces of the terrible sin of heterosexism. This is all true. Now, according to critics, the policy would mean that as early as junior kindergarten, all children had to be taught that it was entirely natural for Jimmy or Sally to have 2 mums or 2 dads. And what was so disturbing about this story is that opponents of the policy seemed intimidated and frightened of speaking out. Now, in free and open Canada, that is. The campaign against the Ontario Liberal sex ed nonsense seems to have found itself against similar aggression, and even when it pays for ads outlining its position. You know, there are none so intolerant as those who claim to support tolerance.